Welcome to Irongeek Cast number 211.5, Irongeek versus God. So named because, have you ever seen the comedy documentary series called John Safran versus God? Am I the only one that's seen this?
I've not seen it.
This is great comedy. You got to watch this. John Safran is some variety of Judaism, and he wants to go and find out what religion he should become. So he tries all sorts of things, like he tries Buddhism. He tries some of the Native American religion where you have to eat peyote. The Buddhist one is interesting because he keeps getting smacked by sticks throughout the entire thing. I had a roommate once said he was into Buddhism. And so whenever I saw that scene, I wrote on a stick around here, Joshua beating Zen stick or something.
Well, which sect of Buddhism? Because there's a lot of them, and they have some pretty differing practices and beliefs.
Point taken. This would probably be Leighton White Boy who grew up in the Midwest Buddhism. Is that a particular variety? Because that'd be the one this guy followed.
That could be a lot of them. It depends upon the regional stuff, really.
Okay. Well, on to the subject at hand. Joe was kind of come on. I did a poll a few weeks ago about. I'm trying to figure exactly how I phrased it. Even.
You said you were bored of your agnosticism.
Oh yes.
What religion should you try?
Yeah, and the ones I had listed up were Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and atheism. Christianity got the most votes, then atheism, then Islam, and then Judaism. Christianity got 36.6% of the votes, and atheism got 33.1%. And Joe is going to come on and go talk a little bit about
Christianity.
Correct.
Yep. Well, so I'd like to first understand where you come from and your view of agnosticism, why you've held that belief, and just get to know a bit more about where you are today and your beliefs about the existence of or lack of existence of a God.
I guess a lot of mine comes down to the problem of evil. If there is an all-powerful, all-knowing God, how come evil exists? Now, there's all sorts of theodicies to spread to get out of unnatural evils. Let's say, like some dictator killing a bunch of people or something. Anything that's caused directly by humans, because you can use the free will theodicy to get around that. But it doesn't necessarily help with like natural disasters, let's say like earthquakes or volcanoes or whatnot.
Yep.
Well, you're asking about, those are very profound questions, okay? And that's, why does evil exist? Well, that's a tough one.
And you separate the acts of people from the acts of nature. So right. How do you view nature and, hurricanes, thunderstorms, and all of those things as evil? I understand it's bad and unfortunate when those things happen to people, but I'm just curious why you would attribute evil to that.
Well, anything that causes human suffering.
Well, there's a lot of human suffering, and it just doesn't, causes are sometimes self-inflicted as well. So, it's kind of like the roll of the dice, in the world. So, I've been fortunate, so I could say, I've had quite a good life. But other people, have suffered tragically. So, Christianity does go by the, the belief that there's life after death. So, and then of course the question of salvation too.
All right, well, that gets off to another topic though. As far as the problem of evil is concerned, I'm not sure what Joe was going off on. It may have been that, why do I consider, like, say, volcanoes evil? And if you want to go that particular route, then we get into the question of what is evil. I'll say anything that causes great human discomfort without reward. Maybe I'll use that definition for the time being.
And I'm just kind of connecting the thought process, but you're basically saying if there was a good, loving, sovereign, supernatural being, why would he allow those types of disasters to happen, which cause suffering to his creation?
Correct.
Yeah. And the Bible does have an answer for that from the Christian worldview, as well as I would believe the Jewish worldview, being that a lot of that is written about in the Old Testament as well. But obviously I would assume the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, and when they lived there, life was perfect. And so in the beginning, things were as God intended it. And the Bible tells us through their choice to disobey God, they brought sin into the world, and they were then cast out from the garden and forced to work the land. And basically, in the garden, he had a job to do, which was tend to the garden, but there were no weeds and other things that made it hard work. It was really just go pick the fruit and enjoy it, and enjoy the garden and tend to it. But it wasn't gardening like we have today, where you got to till the soil and really work the land and keep all the weeds out and keep the birds off and everything else.
Yes, a lot less toil in theory.
Yeah. So,
but let's say Eve breaking some of the commandments, and then getting Adam to go along with it. That would explain natural evil, though.
Well, what that explains is the created order was then disrupted, and because the land itself was also under the same curse. And so the way the Bible teaches it, it says that the earth is now groaning for its redemption because of the entrance of sin into the world. And so the earth cannot wait to be remade, and so that's why it's attributed as groaning in the Bible. Is the earth is going through the pains of sin just as well as people are, and so because of that, the weather is not always nice, and the plates on the planet are shifting, and therefore you have the magma, which then causes earthquakes, and all of those things that come upon us as natural disasters.
Okay. But God knows the future, so why did he foresee this coming? Like, I remember talking to someone many years ago about dinosaurs, and the topic came up of how dinosaurs got there and so forth, and I said, okay, if God wasn't planning on these things eating meat and killing other animals, why did they give them that set of teeth? And I never got a good answer to that, because it seems like God knows what was going to happen.
Okay, so first of all, God exists out of time. Okay, so you have to understand that one first. And the thing is, even I think it was St. Paul or one of them said that a day to God is like 1,000 years. So there's a lot of allegory, because a lot of these concepts are difficult to understand. I mean,
yeah, I'm pretty sure also Augustine had an idea about God existing outside of time.
I mean,
he was an interesting guy. He was a guy who was, I think, once quoted as saying something along the lines of, "Lord, make us chaste, but not yet." Apparently, a lot of the hang-ups about sexuality in Christianity come from Augustine, because Augustine, when he was younger, used to be a man whore.
Well, I thought it was Saint Constantine.
Constantine may have been too, but I'm thinking of Augustine.
Right. Well, and the point, getting back to time, well, what is time? The passage of time is objects in motion relative to one another. Okay, so, it implies that time is not constant, or at least the passage of time is not constant. So it's hard to understand that. I mean, other than we have, a day, which is sunrise and sunset, for roughly 24 hours. And so there is always a day of the week. That is a constant. So there's always going to be a Sunday, and the next day will be Monday, and so on. And that's why, the calendars work the way they work. And actually, the Jewish calendar is on 28 days, so there's 13 months in a year.
Yeah, it followed the lunar calendar,
Right.
correct?
Which seems to be a little more accurate.
Well, I thought they had lots of. They would have to add a couple of weeks or months because it will get out of cycle because it was a few days short every year.
Well, you're right. I go to a church that's on the Julian calendar, so we're 13 days off.
Yep.
So, and so they say, well, how did dinosaurs exist? How could there be stuff that's millions of years old and all that stuff? Well, I mean, first of all, I think the Garden of Eden was a different place that was connected to the world, but it was cut. Adam and Eve were taken out of there and put here. And so, and I think the passage of time is not relevant, other than people knew a year was a year and a month was a month and a day is a day.
Okay, does that necessarily help? Let's say God is outside of time.
Right. And he does state this pretty clearly in Revelations. He says, "I am Alpha to Omega, from the beginning to the end."
But even if it exists outside of time and you know what's coming, it's not like you know the future. It's just like you know what is, because you see the past and the future and everything as one entity. It still seems like you're creating something knowing what the outcome's going to be.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Is we do have free will, and
I choose not to believe in free will.
Well, we do have free will,
but I choose not to believe in it.
Why do you choose that?
Sorry, bad joke. All right,
he has the free will not to believe in free will. That's the joke.
Yeah. Here's the interesting thing is that, first of all, yes, God knows what will happen, but there's a lot of variables, and God does play favorites, and God does roll dice. Einstein was wrong about that one. Okay, so things happen that surprise God. Okay, he wants people. Yes, God has intervened and changed outcomes, but for the most part, he wants to be surprised, and that's and it's kind of profound to understand it, but talking about God.
The way I've come to look at it, going again back to the story of creation, before he had created the earth and the universe as we know it today, God was not alone. He had his Son and the Holy Spirit, as we understand from the Bible. Mm-hmm. And he also had all the angels and the angelic beings in heaven with him. Yep. So why was that not enough for him? And one of the things is the angels, for the most part, did not have free will. They had one choice once, and that's, the Bible tells us the Satan rose up against God and took a third of the angels with him to fight against God because he wanted to be in that position. And they were cast down to the earth. So that happened at some point, and I'm not precisely clear on exactly when, at what point in our history, whether that was before creation or after creation. But it had to have happened, I would believe, before, because Satan was down here with Adam and Eve in order to tempt them into eating from the fruit that they were forbidden from eating. And so I think for me, God wanted to create a creature that could choose to worship him or choose not to. And he also wanted a being that would be able to create in the same way that he creates. We have an imagination that allows us to be very inventive and do lots of unique things and look at all the wonderful things we have in this world today because of the inventions humans are making. And I think God really rejoices over the worship from those who choose to believe in him, trust him, and worship him. And that's the kind of worship that he cannot receive from angels who, in a sense, don't have that free will choice of choosing to worship him as we do.
By the way, I switched off to my phone because my laptop is draining battery for some reason. I don't know why.
Yep.
Okay.
So you see two of me up on the screen. That's the reason why I had to switch to my phone.
No worries.
See, like I said, my big problem is like the free will theodicy, which a theodicy is any kind of explanation around the problem of evil in philosophy. Free will theodicy works fine for me in explaining how, terrible human beings like Andrea Dworkin rise to prominence and those kind of evils. But it just doesn't work for me necessarily for natural evils. Let's say Mount Pompeii going off and killing a bunch of people, being buried in the ash. And I understand the idea that evil was loosed on the world because of original sin and having to leave the garden, which I suppose makes part of that creation story kind of similar to what was the name of that Pandora's box. But I just have all-powerful, all-knowing God, all-loving God. Well, not necessarily all-loving. That's got false pretense. But the problem of evil still gives me pause there.
Well, see, I think you're misunderstanding it. Okay, so I mean, the Earth is it is what it is. Okay, there are natural disasters and stuff like that. That's just part of our existence here. Okay, and I think even God had a purpose for that. He says, well, you need to struggle in order to grow, because if everything is handed to you, then how are you going to progress and grow? I mean, you'll fall further down into evil. I mean, that's I think that's part of it. And I mean, if you look at the scriptures, and it's a lot of a lot of explanations about it. For example, people who are tend to be faithful. They in versus those the seeds that are sown on the rocks and don't sprout. So it goes both ways.
I've heard of the soul.
We lost him again.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you religious, Barry?
Yes, I'm Eastern Orthodox.
Awesome.
I've been Eastern Orthodox for a long time.
Yep.
I mean, I should go over. I mean, I got a nice big thick book on Genesis and creation and that sort of thing. I should go over again. I mean, I read it. It's of course I'm tired and I've been busy all day, so and this is like a surprise. And here's an interesting thing: we're on old calendar, so guess what? Easter is not until next month.
Yeah. I have some friends that are Orthodox from Ethiopia, and that's made me more aware of the differences and how they follow the traditional Jewish calendar for when Passover is, and that's where they put Easter.
Yep, that's correct. And so that because we're not allowed to have the Resurrection Sunday during a Passover day, it has to be afterwards. That's the rule. And of course, March 21st is the beginning of spring, so it always has to be after March 21st. Even though the equinox is, it kind of shifts. That's how the Ecumenical Council chose it. And of course, we're on the Julian calendar because there was no Ecumenical Council that said you change the calendar to be Gregorian. So you're back, Adrian. I see.
Trying to add myself back. I'm having problems.
Echo.
Yeah, the problem is I have to
You got
leave my
echo.
browser open on my phone to be able to get in. Why isn't that stopped? That's annoying. Okay. Why isn't that laptop stopping? I haven't waited. All right, someone else besides me is looping back.
So what now?
Someone besides just me is looping back. Never mind. We'll move on from some of the problem of evil. I think the last thing I said, there's a soul building theodicy, which is basically as maybe natural evils in the world, because it helps to build better souls who struggle and so forth, which I suppose could be an explanation.
Well, Adrian, here's a point that you mentioned earlier, talking about natural disasters, and you mentioned about things such as fires and earthquakes and floods and all that jazz. But there's also a big one. You mentioned creation, back with the Garden of Eden, and that was one of the punishments for Eve, was because she took of the tree of knowledge. She forsake all women to suffer the pain of childbirth as penance for her actions. And that is a form, I guess you could say, of natural suffering that is inflicted upon us by God. And that kind of, when I ever read that bothered me. And it's just, we say that God is omnipotent, omniscient, all-knowing, all-caring, all-loving, but He's willing to inflict upon those who have not sinned the punishment for sin, so to speak, even though they've done nothing to warrant it. Even though, and we see later after Revelations that His only begotten Son Jesus died for our sins and basically wiped the slate clean, but we still persist in this perpetual, penance.
So, and you're trying to talk about something that is very profound. I mean, so the tree of knowledge, okay, I consider it to be allegory because what happened way back then is beyond my understanding. I mean, it must have been pretty bad. All right, and so I mean, and remember, mankind, human beings, could walk among God and talk to Him and and relate with Him like I mean, literally they could see God and talk to Him, and that was one of the consequences of the fall of man. Was unless God chose, you would not be able to talk to Him.
Now, Barry, I think you said you're Eastern Orthodox.
Yes.
Joe, what denomination are you from?
I align with the Southern Baptist.
Okay. I grew up with a bunch of those. I went to a school that was ran by, I believe, a bunch of Southern Baptists.
Yep.
Hung out with them and Catholics, and I was raised something called Restoration Christian, which the idea was to take Christianity back to what it was like at the time of Pentecost. Though exactly how much we know of what it was like at Pentecost, I don't know. But that was that church. My grandma was religious, so was my uncle. I kind of fell by the wayside, so to speak.
Well, Pentecost means 50, okay? Meaning it's 50 days after the resurrection.
Okay, I wasn't aware that's what it literally meant, but
and that's the Holy Spirit Day. So where the Helper came down to for those who asked for it and received the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and what we know, I think, really just comes from the book of Acts from the Bible that explains how those churches met, and we know very little other than they met in homes and they fellowshipped over the scriptures and the words of Jesus, and they shared things together to help each other out, and that's all it really tells us. But yeah, I mean, are we finished talking about natural disasters and stuff? Are you wanting to move on to a new topic?
Yeah, let's move on to a different topic or a different subject. Why Christianity versus some other religion?
Well, I would believe, for me, Christianity provides the one answer, the one way, because I believe there truly is only one God. I believe He has been revealed to us through the Bible, first through the Jews and now through the religion of Christianity. So, to me, that is the one way. And Jesus Himself said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." That's obviously a very well-known scripture, and that's what defines Christianity as the one true religion, and all other religions, therefore, by meaning of that, are not ways also to get to a heaven or to God. I know there's people who believe in pluralism, such that any religion gets you to heaven so long as you follow that chosen religion's moral codes, etc., and so forth.
Yeah, that's a little namby-pamby for me. I like rules and structure. How do we put it this way? I used to say sometimes I'm religious but not spiritual. And the reason I say this is because I see so many people say I'm spiritual but not religious, which basically is kind of like saying, yeah, I believe in some namby-pamby version of something that might be better in the afterlife, but I don't want to actually face any of the moral requirements that would face me if I was to follow Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or something else.
Well, when you're talking about, for example, divine judgment, okay, whether you will be judged worthy to enter heaven, I mean, that is very profound. And that is not up to any of us. That is up to God. The judgment seat of Christ is. So that, it's beyond my understanding, other than, repentance and being penitent. I mean, that's part of it, and also forgiveness. So, that's the important aspects of Christianity, because, I mean, you got to realize that no one lives without sin. Everybody sins, and it may be something very minor, but it sin literally means deviation from the path of righteousness.
And I think you have to really go back and look at things, and I think it's helpful to be binary in this sense. For me, I don't believe there's any way this world came about except for by a creator, and I think that creator was God. With that, we have the stories of the original Bible, which is His revealed way of revealing Himself to the world through, at that time, the Jewish religion. And that God had a larger plan for the overall redemption of the world. And I hate to keep going back to Genesis, but that really helps form the basis for why do we have the problems in the world that we have? Why do we have what we call sin? And that's because when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, they lived in perfect union with God, and they could fellowship with Him face to face because there was no barrier between them and God. When they chose to be disobedient, then they committed a sin, and therefore they had to be cast out and could no longer be in His physical presence. And so sin is what separates us from God, and all it takes is one sin in order to do that. That puts a blemish on us, and God in His the way that He is as a sovereign being and creature who is true and just cannot abide by sin, and so that's why we have things that are cast out, and why there's punishment and those things for the sins that we all commit. But then He gave them the law in order to follow. He gave them sacrifices to help make atonement until the time in which the perfect sacrifice could be made. And so I don't want to continue on with that yet. I'll pick that up later, but I kind of want to look at, is there a God in your view? And then is there truth? I mean, how do we define truth? And on what basis can we define truth? And I find my truth coming from the Bible as far as what it says. We all should know the 10 Commandments to some degree of, don't lie, steal, murder, perjure in court, don't commit adultery. Those are sins against others that we're told not to commit.
Well, the
and we all seem to have a general understanding of those are right ways to behave, but why?
The actual in the Bible, it says don't bear false witness against your neighbor. It doesn't say don't lie, even though you can be it can be very simple to lie. So it's kind of interesting, how the original meanings of them are.
Well, and that's part of the problem is the works of the Bible are technically third-hand knowledge because they're passed from God to Jesus to his followers. So there's going to be, you play a game of telephone and information gets lost, and then we also have it getting lost again with mistranslations and various, communication mishaps that way. There's the popular misconception of thou shalt not kill. No, it says thou shalt not murder because they use a specific word for murder as opposed to kill. And if you look at, the original writing, it does use that word for murder, which to someone who may not be, linguistically educated may look like kill, which is not the same thing.
Yeah.
You are correct because
I'd also like to point out one thing, especially about translations. A lot of the original writings were very poor grammatically, and so they have to be taken in context to the conversational language at the time. And I think that most of the translations of the Bible have done very well at putting, that, in. And so when you say, well, it may be bad yes, I mean there's actually a schism because of a bad translation with the Armenians, because it was just a bad translation of the Armenian language. So it's the translation is important, but understanding that yes, it was poor grammar, it was conversational language. And so you have to how people thought then versus how people think now is much different. So, I think King James is one of the best English translations. The Revised Standard. The language in the time of Christ was Greek. It was not Aramaic, although Aramaic was, because that was the original language. But and that has changed over time. I mean, now Hebrew is not Aramaic, and even the Greek is not the same Greek. So it's kind of you have to take a deep dive into it and try to find the context of the language.
Yeah, NIV is New International Version is the one I usually hear people recommend.
I'd say Revised Standard would probably be reasonable with Apocrypha. That's me because I'm Orthodox, so And gotcha. the Ethiopian Copts, they found the other part of the Book of Enoch, which is not considered. It's a apocryphal work, and that's pre-Genesis writing there. There's a few of them.
Right now, Enoch was another one of the sons of Adam, wasn't it?
I think it was son of Methuselah or something like that.
Yeah, he was, I think, seventh from Adam and generations. He was before Noah.
Okay. Oh, back to the subject of punishment we were talking about before. What exactly is the nature of hell? Because eternal fire and brimstone seems like a hell of a punishment. Am I saying the translation of hell in some parts of the Old Testament literally meant hole, and sometimes they translate Gehenna to something like hell, and Gehenna was essentially a trash dump nearby Jerusalem where they kept burning stuff constantly. What exactly is the nature of hell?
That's a tough one because remember the angels that were fallen were cast down to the earth. Okay, and the history is really fuzzy in Genesis. The corruption of man. The mighty men, the Titans, all sorts of words for when angels mixed with human beings.
The Nephilim. I think the Nephilim is one of them.
Nephilim, yeah. But I think what happened is that God cast them under the earth. So the dark spirits, were forced, after or during the flood. I think that was part of what happened is they were bound to the underground of the earth, which as spiritual beings, now they're attached inside of rock and molten lava. And so, and supposedly, human beings went down into the earth too, although maybe not as far as the fallen angels, to wait for being freed. And of course, Christ did free them.
So I guess is there someone out there chilling and basically, sorry, someone's looping back.
It's you.
It is me?
Yeah.
Off my own phone?
Oh, no, I guess it was Joe, because he muted and stopped.
Okay. Oh. Cool.
Yeah, I turned off my GPU alerts.
Are people going to be existing in hell for eternity, or is Jesus' salvation include them too?
That's a good question. And, the thing is, it's not up to me. It's not up to you. I don't, we don't know. I hope that everybody is saved. Okay. That's my, personal hope. And, and I don't, believe it or not, it is a sin to say you're going to hell, okay, and making a judgment, because that is basically saying God damn. That is a blasphemy. You don't do that, okay? You don't say he's going to hell. It is you're not supposed to make that kind of judgment, because that is not yours to do. And profound judgment is, the judgment is profound. It is beyond understanding. So hopefully, no one does. That's my hope.
Joe, you got a take on that?
Yeah, I think basically those who are not followers of Jesus are going to be the ones who go to hell. The ones who are followers of Jesus are the ones who go to heaven to be with him.
Okay, but is hell a literal place of, what was the phrase? Would a flame die if not, and the worm? Oh, I can't remember how it goes.
Well, there's pictures of Gehenna which talk about that is that trash dump that was near Jerusalem, and that's where the trash fires never died, and the worms just kept getting bigger and bigger because they were feasting on all of the refuse there. But then there's other places talking about the pit of fire and the lake. And I believe there is a place, because Revelation tells us that God's going to cast all of those down, mainly Satan, but all of those who follow him in his folly are going to go there for eternal punishment. And it sounds very unfair for those who are going, because I would not wish that suffering on anyone. And that is why it is a motivation for Christians to want to reach out to people and tell them there is a way to avoid that punishment.
Okay,
but let me also interject that the hell, which has been a place since for a long time, is not going to be the same when the universe finally ends. Okay, so those that are cast out and don't go to heaven, they're going to be with the fallen angels, and they're going to be cast into outer darkness. And so that means they're going to be, they're not going to be in the presence of God at all. And so that is, that's the fate. And so it's not going to be pleasant. And so what, does it mean, eternal tortures and hellfires? Probably not, but it could be torments of another nature, because, you're going to be living with the worst sort of beings there is. And remember, all the fallen angels despise you. Okay, they all hate human beings. That is their one characteristic.
And something else to note here is that the classic idea of hell being a lake of brimstone and fire is not necessarily a unified one. There are many different opinions and theories as to what hell is like. Some say it's a barren, desolate wasteland. Some say it's a frozen pit. So there are different outlooks on that. Keep in mind that when the dominant religion at the time was Greek, was ancient Greece, and using that pantheon, and they had a concept of an underworld, which is like a hell, but it wasn't anything like this lake of fire and brimstone. So that may have been a way to translate that idea to them, is to compare it to the underworld, the cross the river Styx and go in the realm of Hades. And so there may be a case of no one really knows what it was, because it may be lost in translation. I think the idea of a lake of fire and brimstone is universally unpleasant, so that's kind of why that gets used a lot.
I've also had people define hell as simply being outside the presence of God.
Well,
yeah, that was something I was getting ready to say as well, because here on earth we have a portion, so to speak, of his presence, because he is present in this world, and his grace is offered to us even when we don't know him. There are probably times in our lives, and I can recall some before I ever came to faith, where I could just see his hand of grace intervening in my life in somewhat small ways. And so the fact that he is able to be in this world and act and be present has us somewhat close to him, but not in relationship with him. Whereas hell is going to be complete separation and complete darkness, because God is light as he defines himself. So his complete absence is going to be darkness.
Well, and I think that there was the old version of hell, the Tartarus, the Hades, which was bound to the earth. Okay, it was, remember, you're still a spirit, but you're bound under the ground. Okay, and according to, if the more evil you were, the deeper you go towards the fallen angels and torment. And that is, but that is not the permanent hell. That was the hell bound to earth. Then, Christ, was crucified, and he went and released the captives. And he took them out of that boundaries. And now they're, and they probably went straight to judgment, so outside of time. And I think that's the main difference. While those that are, especially the fallen angels and demons and what like, are still bound under the earth. And it may be a spiritual realm, but in other words, they can't get out between the rocks. They're gone. They're stuck. And that's kind of how it's weird how to think of that way. But yeah, that seems to be how it was interpreted. So yes, the fallen angels and Satan are bound to the earth, and the fallen angels can influence mankind, but they're not in direct contact with mankind. Now, there may come a point during the Great Tribulation where those who are bound to the earth will be released.
You ever read Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's an enjoyable book if you ever get a chance. If anybody who listens to the stream who hasn't read that book or listened to it, I think there's like more than one of them too. There's like the Screw Tape Letters, and I think there's one other book. Screw Tape Makes a Toast, I think.
Well, I didn't read the complete. So I read only a few of those. I mean, I was never a C.S. Lewis fan, although I've read quite a bit.
I like the Screw Tape Letters, and I also read his book, Mere Christianity.
Okay.
Yep. Those are two of my favorites, as well as G.K. Chesterton on Orthodoxy.
I think C.S. Lewis gave a very good version of the moral argument for the existence of God in Mere Christianity.
Yep.
Wasn't quite good enough for me, but I think he did a very good job of it.
Yep. I like Chesterton. Yep.
Yep.
Chesterton I haven't read.
Well, there's a Daily Chesterton. You can follow that. I don't know if he. I haven't gotten any notifications on Twitter. But quite good, and he's more modern. So.
Back to a previous question, though. Why choose Christianity over one of the other religions? Because other religions, have certain claims about the divinity of the people who started them, or what the connection of those people were to God. Though generally they don't say that they were God; they would say they're a prophet of God. But why Christianity over, let's say, some other religion?
I think it's the one that brings the most hope into the world, and a biblical worldview really helps you to understand, I think, everything that's going on in our world in a much better way. And when I have to say this, but when you look at what Christianity is meant to be, based on how Jesus has defined it and how it was originally defined, it is a religion that really does, I think, improve things for people here on the earth and provides the most hope for a good life and as much as can be here and in the future of heaven. I've looked at other religions and I looked at what they offer, and I don't see that same message in there. Most of the other religions I can see are very works-based religions that require you to be obedient and follow a strict set of rules and do these things. And if you do these, your sins will be not counted against you. And as long as you do enough good things, you can kind of tip that balance into the good scale so that you can make it into the afterlife. And I don't see. For me, I don't think those religions really offer a good portrayal of and a good answer for why is there good and evil in the world? Why is there suffering? And why do they allow for some suffering and things like that? I don't find them providing good enough answers, or leading to a good sense of what really is the true nature of God.
Now, you brought up salvation by faith alone, correct?
Yep, correct.
Now, question, I'm curious from various standpoints. Eastern Orthodox, that they split off before Protestant. I can't say Protestantism. I can't say the word. They kind of split off before that. What is their? Are they salvation by faith alone, or is they salvation partly by work?
By all of it. You can't buy your way into heaven, and it is. There are mechanisms, including, professing, faith and asking for forgiveness from Christ. Okay, that is very, a core belief. But it is we are a confessional church, and we believe in forgiving and asking for forgiveness, and that is extraordinarily important. In other words, you recognize that you have faults, that you're imperfect, and you ask to be forgiven for those. And then those that have committed crimes against you of various types, you also ask for the strength and ask and you forgive them. It's a tough thing to forgive others, especially when they've done something pretty bad. And that is part of it. That is the basic of the Lord's Prayer. It is yes, there is asking for for salvation from Christ is core to it, and then living it, of course, is living a life of at least trying to repent. And that's that means you don't have to go around feeling guilty all the time. It actually, forgiveness it relieves the burden on your shoulders, okay, of resentments. That's a very important thing. And of course, the Orthodox Church has sacraments. Of course, there's baptism, chrismation, confession. There's marriage. There's holy orders. There's holy unction, which is all these are mechanisms of the faith that has been given to us to help us along in our journey in life.
What's the primary difference between Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics?
Well, we're very similar, except for I think we're a bit more democratic. Okay, the actual Church of Rome was the first. It's considered the first among equals, and then the Church of Constantinople was the second. I think there was 5 original churches. I think there was Alexandria and Cyprus. I'm trying to think of all of them. And there was a schism basically in 1204, and there was some politics going on. Because men are weak. And so there was a mutual, there was an excommunication. So the Pope said the rest of the Eastern churches are no longer recognized, and that the Church of Rome is the primate of all. So it became more of a monarchical church instead of an ecumenical church.
Well, there's more differences in that too.
Sure.
For example, how does the Eastern Orthodox treat the Pope?
Well, I mean, again, he was the Bishop of Rome. It's kind of like we try to have good relations with them, but we're not going to say we're not going to be in communion with them.
Okay, but that's one example there. Yeah, the Catholics view the Pope as the voice of God. He communicates with God. To put it pretty simply, Catholics also believe in the concept of indulgences, where you pay for sin relief, so to speak. They also have confessionals as well, but you can buy an indulgence. That was kind of a popular item back in the medieval times, and that was part of what caused the schism between the Catholics and the Protestants. Was the idea that they got rich and powerful, and you could buy your way out of things, and other people didn't see that. So,
and there's a big difference on confession. When you do your confession before a priest in the Orthodox Church, the priest is a witness. Not as he does not grant absolution. He asks you if you want to be forgiven, and he, that you are actually asking for forgiveness from Christ. And so there's a big difference than a priest having the power of absolution. That's not how the Orthodox, even I don't even think the Anglicans practice that, where they have the power of absolution.
Yeah,
They certainly don't.
My understanding was it the big differences were things like that you described just now is the theological and the church practices of how things are administered in services, as well as the authority of the Roman bishop versus I'm
right.
looking up something about the Pentarchy, which was the 5 bishops that represented the 5
Right.
big churches. They were all, from an Eastern Orthodox perspective, peers, but Rome wanted to claim primacy.
Right.
And elevate themselves, and so that is why that split occurred.
That, in essence, that's what happened. And of course, when the Crusaders, the Templars invaded Constantinople and sacked the city, that didn't really help things, and put, it was an awful time. So, and they, the thing is that the Orthodox were actually in support of the Crusades, but when the Templars, were had their allegiance to Rome, and they didn't recognize the Greek version of the church. So, and Latin came after. I mean, the time of Christ, there was very little Latin spoken. Even it was mainly in Italian peninsula, but the world language is Greek, because it's the Greek had been dominant for several hundred years. So it's kind of interesting how things change over time. And of course, the modern Hebrew, the Hebrew Bible, or the modern Hebrew, even it was not the Aramaic Hebrew. So that language changed.
Yeah,
it came after time of Christ.
Yeah, Aramaic was a more common man language, separate from the Hebrew. It was Syrian in origin, I think, is my understanding. And so the common people spoke Aramaic, and the priests would speak in Hebrew, because that's what the Torah was written in.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, I mean, the old Aramaic was all the, like, the Dead Sea Scrolls were definitely Aramaic. A lot of the old texts. I mean, because modern Hebrew is not the same as the older Hebrew, the original language of the Hebrews. So.
And I'm reading a book. I posted it in chat about the original Gospels. As you can get it on Amazon, but someone actually went through the effort to go and get a lot of the historical fragments and pieces of parchments that we have that make up some of the original Gospels as written. And it was interesting that Mark's Gospel was written in Latin because he was in Rome for a Roman audience when he wrote that Gospel, and then Matthew was written in Aramaic because that's what he was more familiar with. So a lot of our Bibles do bring the Greek translations of those is what they're typically based off of. And it's interesting that this book goes into getting to the original Syriac and Latin and Greek versions of the copies that we have that go as far back as we can to the original copies, and then provides a more literal translation of it. It's been an interesting read. It's not really that different from what we have today. I mean, obviously the phrasing is a little bit different than any of the other translations, but we do have the ability to get back to the original writings and present those. So I know a lot of people claim that the Bible we have today, because of mistranslations and other things, take us far away from what its original meaning was.
but they really are not
No.
that far in difference.
No, I mean, the Living Bible and some of the others kind of, they kind of, deviated a bit. And, and that was one of the first Bibles I read. Hey, stuff falling down. Place falling apart. Anyway, but yeah, I would say Revised Standard is a pretty good modern translation. King James, if you like the these and thous, and that's the thing is having the actual gender, and gender means a masculine, feminine, or neutral, not the modern woke version. Because so many languages, especially Romance languages and Russian and everything else, are very much have those genders. And so a general neutral Bible is not a good translation. Yeah. But also getting back to what was I going to say? Let's talk about comparative religions, for example. Okay, so let's see. There's atheism. There's agnosticism. That's just non-belief. Many flavors of it. Humanism. But you want actual religious beliefs. Say, for example, Hinduism, which is a polytheistic religion. They believe in the do-over, okay, reincarnation, and caste systems and that sort of thing. And there were many gods, and some of the more modern Hindu beliefs say that they're all the many aspects of the early gods are all one god. And an interesting thing is that even like Buddhism, which it says to reach nirvana you have to they believe in reincarnation, but they also believe in demons and ghosts and stuff like that. Quite an interesting thing. Sikhism, which is a monotheistic religion. They believe in one God, but they also believe in reincarnation. Really nice people too. That's I've never had any. I've met many Sikhs, and they were always treated me with genuine compassion and respect.
Yeah, I've only really known one, and I don't know him real well. He's nice, and I had friends who have served with them in the military and said they're real nice.
Yeah. And many people don't understand that. Yeah, Sikhism is a monotheistic religion. There's one God, but they also believe in reincarnation. And of course, there's but one aspect to all these beliefs is that humanity is imperfect, and you have to go through something to reach perfection. If you want to be all enlightened in Buddhism, you have to be reincarnated, and you have to be live a perfect sin-free life to become this one with nirvana. And so it's kind of interesting that there's so many. I mean, even the ancient Greek religions with those gods, they believed in ghosts and demons and that sort of thing. So when you see, you all see that a lot of of course Islam, of course obedience will grant you entrance into heaven. So that I think I'm not studied on Islam as much. I know there's 7 pillars and that sort of thing, but so Christianity is the one that says, well, you're never going to be without sin, but you can be forgiven for it. So there's no do-overs or anything like that. You ask for forgiveness, and you wish, and that's part of it. And it's not just for me. It's what do I wish for? How do I want to be rewarded when I die? I said I never asked for anything other than surprise me. So you kind of learn life much differently through Christianity. And things don't bother you as much anymore. It's an important thing. Now, I think is Adrian off or on?
He's off again. How about you, Darren? What's your background?
In what regards?
In regards to religion, do you believe there's a God, not a God?
I'm an atheist, so no, I don't believe there's a God. I was basically raised in a household that kind of said, go find your own path and do your own thing. And I've read the Bible, I've read the Torah, I've read the Quran, I've read, Buddhist koans, I've read works of Tao, I've read Shinto works, I've read Theravada, Mahayana Buddhism, a lot of esoteric ones too, like old Jainism, stuff like that. So I've studied a lot of different religions to find where I am now. So I'm not an atheist out of ignorance.
All right, Adrian's back. Well, I can tell you that I've come to understand about atheists and agnostics, and they go through life and they just simply say, I don't believe. And it's in their hearts, they just can't believe. That's something you got to accept. And so, I'm not going to condemn them for that or anything like that. Because now I understand they just don't believe. That's how they are. And that's, how life is. So, anyway, you missed some of the discussion about comparative religions.
Yeah, sorry. Disconnecting from my phone business stuff.
Well, you can connect your phone to Wi-Fi and see if you can get a better connection.
Yes, and I have. The thing is, if I ever close this browser to do anything else, it kills the connection.
Okay.
But I can't re-add myself. Anyway, it's a pain in the ass to use my phone versus using my laptop.
Well, you need to take it to Louis Rossman and have him fix it. He'll probably charge you a bit, or either that or just buy another laptop.
I'm not going to do that. I don't know how expensive this one's going to be, though.
I got so many computers, but I only got one laptop with a camera, and I use that as a backup financial systems laptop. The only time I ever use the camera on it was whenever I was sick with COVID and I needed to do a teledoc, and that's it. It's just one of those things. I'm paranoid. I got to have, if something happens, main system, I'm going to have that as a backup computer to fix it. Get into all my bank accounts, change passwords, do all the other fun stuff.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all coming on to talk a little bit about religion tonight. I think I'm going to be bowing out here before too long. Does anybody have any last words they want to say?
Well, I'll tell you this. You need to kind of educate yourself in, and there's a lot of misconceptions about Christianity. And of course, there's, a lot of people really don't understand the fundamentals of what the Baptists believe, or the Eastern Orthodox, or Roman Catholics. And of course, there's the Eastern Orthodox. There's the Coptic Orthodox, which are monophysite. We are dual nature. They are single nature. Mormons. I mean, very LDS Church. Of course, these are gone now. And I don't have anything really bad to say about the LDS. I mean, they're every Mormon I've known have always been very decent and reasonable to me. So
yeah, I would echo those sentiments. They're usually very nice people. They're a little weird, and I kind of hate to say it this way because it sounds very slandery, but very culty in some ways. Some of the practices they follow are a little strange, but it's not nothing. Oh, it's nothing dangerous. Just kind of odd to the outside view. But they're usually solid people. I've never had one mistreat me or.
Yeah,
like
I mean, I don't understand about magic or holy underwear or anything
Yeah.
like that,
That's one of those, yeah.
But then again, you got to understand something as well is a lot of, the Orthodox Church that has sacraments, and those are we have, holy water, and we have holy oil. There's two types. There's holy unction oil. That's the Great and Holy Wednesday, the Wednesday before Easter Sunday, is and we have these are what's called tools. And of course, we believe in transformation of when taking communion. Communion is another sacrament, and we believe that the communion has the attributes of the body and blood of Christ when it is blessed, and that is an important function of it's just another tool that we use in the faith.
Yep.
And so, and these are God-given tools. And of course, so let's see. There's also funerals. An Orthodox funeral is one of the sacraments: marriage, holy orders, confession, communion, baptism, chrismation, holy unction. We don't have indulgences.
Yeah, that's a very Catholic thing. That's why I mentioned earlier. It's one of those ways that Catholics and Protestants have split. That's a big one.
I mean, we do ask for your time, talent, and treasure, but we also ask that you give out of love, and that's the important thing. And that's one thing I always emphasize to people is when you're doing things, especially for the church. And I'm one who has served, for 18 years on a church board. And I do it out of love, not for anything else. It is just, that's it. I give contributions to the church. It's out of love. And so whenever, tithing and stuff like that, what's important is to have people understand why. The church, God doesn't need a building, and it doesn't need electricity and that sort of thing, but we do, and so that's why we contribute to the church, so we have a place to worship, and that's an important thing. And so if you love not only God but your fellow parishioners, you want to have a good place to worship and commune. Therefore, it takes money.
Yep.
So that's the important thing about charitable works. Yes, charity is important. Give out of love. So have a good grasp on what you're giving and why you're giving.
And I was going to say I think the emphasis on tithing is really to show the proper place of God's sovereignty in your life, and that you acknowledge that all that you have comes from Him, and you're willing to give freely of it and be a good steward of what you've been provided.
Yep, stewardship is part of it. Believe me, 18 years. And I sat on a board and helped build a nice building, and helped as part of all of that. Went from a small church school congregation with $2,000 in the bank, and having problems paying the priests and stuff like that, to now we're doing very well. And it was a lot more than just giving. It was a lot of praying and faith, and miracles. Just things worked. It's I mean, it's not. It was an extraordinary journey for me, and it was unexpected. I did not expect how well things turned out for our small church, and yeah, we're doing very well. We got a building that's 50 feet tall and made of stone. It has frescoes. It is a work of art. And inside, the stories of the Bible are on the walls, because iconography was the original writing. And that's what people don't understand. You're not, worshiping pictures or anything like that. You're telling a story, because our church came from a tradition where people were not literate, and so they saw icons and scenes, and the priest, or a deacon, or a church elder, tutori, or would explain what this meant. And so that's why we retain the iconography. And also, it's not just you just can't have any artist come in and do it. It has to be one that's trained in that type of practice and is given a blessing from the bishop and all this stuff. And yes, we have bishops, and we have a hierarchical structure. We have patriarch, we have metropolitans, which are archbishops, and we have bishops, and then you have archmandrites, which are the head priests of monasteries, and then of course we have monks and we have nuns, holy orders, priests. We have married priests. We have deacons. We have readers. I almost became a tonsured reader, but I decided to let somebody else fill that role. And all of this structure plays a role in the church, especially monastics. People don't understand, monastics seclude themselves. Of course, they're hermits, and there are monasteries, but a lot of these monastics, besides charitable works they do, they also keep the faith and tradition. They are the ones that are going to keep the doctrines of the church as pure as possible when outside forces are trying to deviate how things work. And because there's politics in every major organized religion. Doesn't matter if it's Protestants or of course the Catholics and everything else, but the monastics stick to the faith, and they are the ones that usually wind up correcting the errors, and sometimes it takes a couple of centuries. And so their role is very, very important. And these are people that dedicate their lives to the worship and of God and Christ. Yeah. So, and just a lot to it. It's, I know Baptists, you have somebody goes to school, becomes a preacher. That's wonderful and great, and they have a calling in life, and it's different, but
Yep. Yeah, we have, ordained priests. Some of them have seminary degrees. Some of them don't. Some of them, it's up to the local congregation to be a part of that process, and to, who they select for their chief elder in that way.
Yeah. And we the priest is assigned a congregation by the bishop, whether the bishop is an archbishop like a metropolitan, and our church we were fortunate enough to have a metropolitan Christopher. He was actually from Galveston, and he was married at one time. Now, also, by the way, bishops are not allowed to be married. They're supposed to be monastic. And what happened to our metropolitan? His wife passed away, and he couldn't remarry, and they made him a bishop, and then later the metropolitan. And he was one of the only 4 metropolitans in the world at the time. And I used to write him letters, and I've talked to him, and really a great man, amazing man, very learned. He was, to the very end, his mind was sharp as a tack on everything. He was very, very traditional. And you come across really amazing people like that in the faith. And you're just like, wow. And all these folks are very subtle and very humble, and it's and you do want to surround yourself with really nice, decent people in your life that can help you, where you feel like you should be better because of all the wonderful people around you. I mean, my godfather in the church was an ex-FBI agent. So, and I have several godchildren. Really, really interesting journey in life. And of course, when you're a godfather, you kind of help them, help guide them into the faith, and you do it with, just being, genuine and humble, and there's no, just point them in the right direction. That's the good thing. And the same with Baptists, and of course, the Baptists. I mean, I've done enough work. I'm considered one. I do a lot of IT work for nonprofits, so I'm considered well thought of in the church community.
So, Darren, with your study of all the different types of religions, what led you to believe that there isn't a God?
A lot of reasons. There's a lot of philosophical and ideological differences there. Like earlier, I mentioned the way God handled Eve with the eternal sin with the pain of pregnancy. That's kind of one of those ones that had me kind of go about that. It was handled very I was poorly, you would say. It shows that God is not that benevolent and all benevolent, I guess, just the simplest way of putting it. Yeah.
So you think he's not benevolent because she ate of one? Is it because of the fruit? I mean, what makes you think her eating of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil was a small act?
I wouldn't say it's a small act, just the fact of how the punishment was handled. I'm trying to multitask here. I guess a benevolent God wouldn't punish all of humanity for eternity that way, the way he did.
Well, I don't think you really understand how profound what happened back then was. Okay, so you're saying that God punished, but what if the act of the knowledge of good and evil and that sort of corruption caused the problem in the first place? Okay, and see there, there's a cause and effect. There are consequences to actions, and I think that the knowledge of good and evil, they were innocent, and the innocent meant that they didn't suffer the pains of childbirth. They they were able to communicate with both God and nature, uh, and once that happened, the knowledge of good and evil corrupted. So there was a chain reaction of events that happened that caused them to no longer be worthy to live in the Garden of Eden paradise. And and the fact is, and if you read about it, we're not going back to the Garden of Eden. That is not. We're not going to enter that anymore. That when the earth goes, the Garden of Eden goes as well. Whenever the universe is transformed, then it's going to go away. But so you look at it. You have to look at that as a consequence, because now they're bound to the earth as biological human beings and have to suffer the pains of labors to and everything else, not only the childbirth, but to toil and make their own way into the earth, on the earth. And they and I think they did. Some of them did actually speak with God directly for a while after being cast out of Eden, but humanity became more and more corrupt and lost that ability.
Well, there's a couple different ways to respond to that. I'll start back with the original point, was that if God punished all womankind for Eve's misdeeds because of that, say it was an appropriate reaction for such a gross act, well then we should start imitating that and being more in God's image. If say you kill someone, well, so should your children should die then too, because and being removed, because your children also pay for your actions, because those children are of your own making. Hold on, there's more, but that's kind of the big point. There is you're making the successors pay for the antecedents actions, which is very inappropriate because they had nothing to do with that. That goes against the idea of being fair and just and compassionate. You don't make someone pay for the actions that their forefathers did. It's grossly inappropriate. Now, at the same time, you mentioned oh damn it, there's another point there too I was trying to make, and I forgot it in that. Okay, crap! I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to make is that human beings, Adam and Eve, were pure beings who suffered no ills, and the corruption that happened, the consequence is that they became the punishment was of their own doing. Okay, not. I mean, in other words, that act put them into a position, that cascaded for all of mankind. And it's more profound than you understand. I mean, it was just pretty terrible what happened, and it seems like it's unjust. But you're trying to say that God, hit them with a bolt of lightning, and now pain in childbirth and everything else. No, now they're bound to the earth as human beings who will die, after the maximum of 120 years. Although early man, lived for well over 1,000 years. Okay, that changed. So we lost that grace from God because of the original sin. So what actually happened? The grace from God was taken away from us.
Okay, and that's a fair point. So it's the same counter. We are made in God's image, so God is just as responsible for that kind of avarice and, I guess you would say, selfishness. So
Well, not
because we are made in because we are made in God's image, we are not necessarily all, we are generally compassionate people. We usually are, but at the same time, if we are, made in God's image, we should either share his same compassion or he should be more like us. It's one of those two ways. And since we clearly don't show his same all love, all compassion, it has to default to the second, which is he is flawed. He is proud. I mean, we see that in the Old Testament too, where he's prone to bouts of anger. He turns a guy into a pillar of salt because of his belief. He tells Jeb to kill his family because on a bed of a devil. He was coerced by the devil to have one of his followers kill his family. That's human fallacy right there. That's a classic tale of how humans are fallible creatures.
Yeah.
So at the same time, you can't say that God is compassionate and loving because he shows these same characteristics that we do, and we know that we do not have this boundless well of compassion, whether that's due to pragmatism or I guess just say it, fucking human nature, to put it simply. So,
Well,
yeah.
you have to remember, according to the Bible, our nature, the way that we act and behave, is altered because of sin. Yes. And so that is why, the things that we do, we cannot perfectly assume because we do it, God does it as well. Because now we're trying to ascribe our character on his. We were made in his image and his likeness in the sense of our original capacity to think and to create and other attributes. And we can't take that saying out of context to say everything we do is also in God's nature, because everything we do is also as a result of sin. That's why we believe we are our own God, typically. That's the real delineation for people, is whether or not they will acknowledge God as the sovereign being in this world, or if they want to choose themselves as the sovereign and serve themselves instead of God. And that's where we find the big conflict, in my view, for those things.
So you got to remember, we were also corrupted, by the original sin and by fallen angels. Okay, we have to live the earth, and in the early times, the angels were running around, having sex with the daughters of men. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And guess what? The Greeks, that was a big part of the Greeks too, is Zeus says, I'm going to stick my dick in it. Everyone says, no, don't do it. And Zeus says, too late.
Yep. And so, what happened is so we have that corruption. And of course, God is angry about that.
Yeah.
I mean, because the angels, they made a 1/3 of them made a choice to go directly against God.
Okay. Now you say that angels are holy beings, and they are similarly God's image. They're closer to God than we are, but several of them made the conscious choice to fly against Him. And the same nature, we are made in God's image, and God is, I guess you would say, antithetical to sin, because that's, I guess, a simple way of putting it. But doesn't the Bible also say, "Follow not into poor company"? I remember the exact phrase. It says, "Follow not into poor company, for you will also be of poor company," or something like that. It's a parable trying to say be mindful of the path you take, because if you go on that path, you're just as bad as the person traveling that path if you
I
lead
don't
them on it.
I don't buy that one. Okay, I
Well,
mean
that's it's a proverb.
you can be
Yeah.
influenced by people who are evil.
Right.
Okay,
Now hold on, that's the point that I'm trying to make, is you say those people are evil and they are of sin, who are leading you onto a bad path. Well,
you
on the
still
same thing,
you still
what's
are
that?
making a choice.
You are making a choice, correct. Now, to revisit the point of the book of Job, he went and killed his family on the orders of God. One of the basic 10 commandments is, thou shalt not kill. He
Well, I
took
don't.
the advice of God to kill.
Job did not kill his family. Disasters were afflicted upon Job's
Okay,
family.
you're right.
Okay,
You're right. You're right.
so
You're right. I
that's
misremember that. You're right. You're
so
all
so
right.
what happened with Job is kind of a remarkable story, where Satan was the only angel that actually directly communicated with mankind. Okay,
Correct.
the fallen angel, because the other ones were full of such rage that they would there's no you know
No,
anyway,
you're
getting
right.
back
No,
to
no.
the
I misremembered the story. That's when you corrected that. So
right.
thank you. That
And
now comes fresh
so
in my
what
mind.
happened?
But
So
but
what
here's
happened?
the point I'm trying to make, though, so we don't go off another tangent, is that Satan told God to do these things, and God did them on behalf of Satan.
Well,
He inflicted snow. He did, because he was testing Job. That Satan said, your followers don't follow you. Well, no, and then God went and inflicted all this horrific suffering on Job, basically to prove a point that yes, they still followed me, still worship me,
well,
and that's
so what God did was remove His protection from Job, and Satan inflicted the inflicted against Job and his family. Okay, that's there's a difference.
but God then made the conscious choice to remove that protection from evil.
Yes.
So that's like, removing the safety guards on a piece of industrial equipment and someone getting hurt by it. It's very similar, because someone acting out in something that's very unsafe, or allowing someone to be in true danger. That's like cutting someone's brake lines on someone's car and saying it's fit for driving. No, it's
Okay,
not.
so Job's faith was being tested, and Job did raise a stink with God about some of the stuff that went on, but the point of it is yes. So Job lost his family, and Job lost quite a bit and suffered greatly. But what if those that Job lost were also granted salvation after their deaths? Okay, because the point of it is it was a lesson in faith.
Well, the faith was already present, though. That the faith was never questioned.
Yeah.
Satan said, we can make your followers lose faith by inflicting pain upon them, and that's what happened. But ultimately, he didn't lose his faith, but the pain was still inflicted on behalf of his deity,
It
indirectly.
wasn't
I mean, it was still God had a playing hand in that one. You can't deny that
God's
at all.
hand was really in the fact that He allowed it to happen,
Yeah.
and God knew that Job's faith would persist. And Job argued And if you read through the entire book of Job, you can see there's three perspectives of God and God's wrath and God's punishment and God's sovereignty portrayed by his friends. And so the book of Job gives us a really good allegory over the character of God and the nature of punishment, whether you receive your punishment in this world or is it in the afterlife. And it gives you a good perspective on his sovereignty, and when Job gets finally frustrated enough with God, he starts lobbing some accusations against God. But God says, where were you when I formed the world? Where were you when I created all of these beings and creatures and put the stars in the sky and keep the sun in its proper place? So God kind of reminds Job of his position as sovereign, and who are we to question him in that sense? And so it may seem from our perspective unfair that God would allow those sufferings to go against Job, that he would allow his children to be killed, his wife to be killed, his servants to be killed, and his flocks to be taken away by thieves. And all of those negative actions were done because Satan caused and inspired those things to happen against him. And as you were saying as well, God had removed his protection because Satan is bound and limited by what God allows him to do, and so that's goes back to some of what Adrian was asking before about the nature of evil and suffering in the world. And it's a hard thing to truly understand and look at it from God's perspective instead of our perspective of
Well,
things being unjust and unfair, because we wonder, well, why do these bad things happen? Why does God allow these things to happen? Why can't he prevent it from happening?
Well, that's a very interesting point you mentioned there. You mentioned that God allows these things, or he chooses not to prevent them from happening in terms of, say, evil, to use a very simple word. Now, we say that God is benevolent and omniscient and omnipotent, so he has the ability to see and prevent it from happening or allow it to happen. But if he does not prevent it from happening, then we can't really say he's benevolent. We go back to that earlier argument of he's more like us in that we do what we can to prevent evil because we're generally altruistic beings. So that raises the question of how can you be certain that there is going to be any kind of reward at the end beyond faith? When you have when you when you're dealing with a person who has a known history of being bad, you let them out of prison and they start raping. You start raping and robbing and killing and doing all these things, and you keep letting them out, and they keep doing it over and over and over. You're releasing them on. You're basically relying on blind faith there, which is not really a great track record. We've seen, blind faith doesn't work that well for getting the means to an end.
All right. Well, I look at it from a much different philosophical point of view. I am grateful and thankful to God of the unfairness of the world, because if everyone got what they truly deserve, the world would be a much more horrible place. All right. And that's something to think about. If everyone had instant karma from the Hindu belief, not good.
Well, not even karma, just I hate to use the phrase justice, but that's kind of one way of looking at it. But even divine judgment, to use another phrase.
Yeah.
We would see examples of people who are good and bad, and
Right.
of course, good and bad is always very subjective to what can appear bad is actually very good, or vice versa. We talk about that all the time here. With social justice warriors being, well, you're kind of fucking loons because you're actually hurting people and doing certain things you're doing. And that just that imposes some very I would say, uncomfortable philosophical questions as to the nature of God. I mean, we see him acting like a petulant child, to put it simply, in some of his early, I guess early Old Testament ways.
I know some people argue about genuine God, and we usually use his and so forth. But I got to admit, some parts of the Old Testament, God definitely acted like a jealous girlfriend, so her might be appropriate.
I think maybe it's the language, but
Yeah.
remember, God is very profound. You don't the understanding. You just don't understand God. It's hard to understand. It's way too profound, and of course, divine judgment is as well. And you can't think of it, in those terms. There's, when you think about, say, for example, social justice and cancel culture. Okay, well, look at the crowds that were demanding that who is it, Barabbas be freed, but Christ be condemned to death. Okay, I mean, that's a prime example of the mob saying we want the bad guy to live because we hate the good guy even more.
Yep.
Because we don't like what he's saying. So, you can start seeing this stuff in the world, and so what I'm saying is it goes, I hope that everybody is saved. Everybody is cured of their sins. I hope that the whole world is like Las Vegas. What stays on the earth remains on the earth, and at the death is the end of sin. And we need to be cured from sin. It is, because sin is a disease. It is an illness on our souls.
I can understand that point of view, and yeah.
And so when you start realizing some of this stuff, especially when you start forgiving people, you start feeling better. When you have less resentments, okay, and that's a forgiveness is a mechanism, and it's a two-way street. So then you start beginning to understand there are there are holy natural laws from God that actually work, and they're very subtle, and there are miracles that happen every day. They're all very subtle because God is subtle. He is not flamboyant. That's the devil. So, and sometimes you have to recognize them. It's like, wow, what did I just see? What did I just experience? And I've experienced a lot of things in my life I don't quite understand, but they happened. Anyway, it's so sometimes you just got to sit back and with a little bit of thought and patience and think about things. I mean, that's what I did. I mean, I chose to be Orthodox, and I didn't know why. I just did. And I'm kind of, I have been an influence on people's lives, and I just didn't. I didn't understand why. I just was. And helped, and people benefited from me being there for something small. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, there's things happening that I don't quite understand, but I'm there.
And that's one of the main benefits of religion. It's been one of the benefits of religion since 8,000 BC, when some of the earliest forms of religion were recorded. Was it gives people a place of community, a sense of purpose, a way to understand the unknown, kind of, I guess, a path forward for some who may not have one necessarily. And that's kind of what it did for you. And for some people, that may be what they need. For others, it may not be what they need.
Well, yes, that I was led to this. Okay, things happen because I didn't resist. It was like, oh, it's stuff I don't quite understand. There's a difference. Okay, it's not just being comfort or anything like that. It is, I've made a difference in people's lives, and I didn't realize it. I didn't quite understand why. It just happened. So I'm still, I mean, of course, it's been rough for me. I had deaths in the family and everything else, but still there's a future where, somehow or another, there's a path down the road that, I'll make a difference somewhere else and do something. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
So it goes beyond just making people feel comfortable and everything else. So and I can understand if if you're frustrated about all the contradictions and hypocrisy and everything else. Everyone's a hypocrite. Everybody sins. We all have fallen natures, and in life is unfair, and I've come to accept this, and and I don't, and faith actually helps me through these things.
Yeah, that's one of the big draws of religion over the years, is it helps people. Again, you get a sense of community, you find purpose and meaning, you find inspiration for getting through horrific events or even daily challenges. So that's, again, some people want that, some people don't.
And I can tell you, I'm one of the most hard-headed people around. Okay, I resist. I'm not. Since I am my own worst enemy on things, and I'm judgmental, and curse, and drink beer, and you know, instead of getting stuff done, I procrastinate. There's all sorts of things. I'm not that is part of me. So I'm not saying I'm saying that I know I have some issues, but I don't uh, I'm not going to make excuses for myself.
Yep.
So, and that's so now once you begin to understand, and really it comes down to you're always worried. If you're worried so much about the unfairness of the world, and but it's not about that. It's about finding your path to salvation, and trying to find a relationship with Christ, on a personal level, and seeing how life leads you, seeing where you go.
And I think that's the whole purpose for Adrian, is to see what he's trying to get some perspective from the outside as to what he should look at. Right, Adrian?
Just something. I don't know. I just don't have a whole lot of purpose.
Well, I've been participating here for a while, and I met you at the San Antonio B-Sides. And I thought, yeah, you're a pretty cool guy and you're knowledgeable and everything else. And so, now we're talking about faith, and I think that's a good thing. Maybe I'm a positive influence, maybe not. I say, find your path. I'm saying, look, you can, you can find a way to not, to not believe if you want to. I mean, that's a personal decision. But you always try to look for why. Why do I need to make my life right with God? Find the whys.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything to say before we close this out for tonight?
Well, Joe, you still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
So, do you have any disagreements with my personal testimony?
No disagreements. I think for everyone, everyone has their own journey they take. I know that God reveals himself in this world to people, and the fact that there is a God, to me, is very self-evident based on the created order of things and how everything is well balanced and works as intended, as people would say. When you look at how nature behaves and how everything integrates together into a complete ecosystem, that just speaks to me of a beautiful designer.
Yeah, my only problem is that the teleological argument is, I think that was what that would count as, is if the universe needs a creator, then does the creator need a creator? Something has to exist without having a creator, so why not apply that property to the universe?
I love that argument, and I've always thought that myself. Well, who's God's God? Okay. And it gets kind of, that's a profound statement. It's a chicken and the egg situation.
Yeah, but
and that's beyond our understanding.
And he tells us in the Word that in the Bible it says, "No one else comes before me." So
Yeah.
he plainly states nothing else did come before him. And so, for me, what led me into religion was really a search for meaning and truth. I found all of the people around me and everything else to just be full of falsehood and self-interest. And I think anyone can look at people and understand that exists in everybody. And I was really wondering, if everything is all relative, then what's the point? And so I wanted to know, is there anything really true in this world? And that search for truth is what led me to discovering God and really understanding him in a more personal way.
Yeah.
And so I hope you have a similar journey of searching for some meaning and truth that lets you understand that there is a divine God that does care for you, that he has provided a way for you to be in relationship with him, and be happy to talk to you more about it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad we're having a discussion on this, and I hope even Darren has, you have at least changed your mind on some of the things that you misconceptions. And like I said, one misconception, of course, is divine judgment. I can't say, you're going to hell or anything like that, because it's not my call. I'm not allowed to do that. That is a sin. That is, and so and people are like, oh, they're pointing the finger and saying, oh, you're a sinner, you're evil. Well, you can see evil if it is evil, but you're not going to say, well, they're going to burn in hell. That's just not, that's one of those naughty things we're not supposed to tell people. And as far as judgments of other people, no.
Yeah, I think if there's one big takeaway here at the end, Adrian, is if you do find religion, please don't become a preachy asshole. I think all of us here will universally say that's a bad thing to become.
Yeah.
That's one thing we can all agree upon.
I think you can, you might be excited about it and everything else. I mean, I was excited. But I didn't overdo it. I was subtle. I helped lead people into into the church, into the life of salvation. But I wasn't pushy. I said, well, here, read this or look at this or think about this, or and that was it.
Yeah. Temperance is the key. I used to be that way when I was younger and dumb. I was more of a combative atheist, and I realized this is stupid. Why am I doing this? This is not helpful, and I kind of knocked that shit off because it's not helpful for them. It's not helpful for me. So why do it?
Right.
Back in the 90s, I used to encounter a lot of evangelical atheists, but I don't seem to encounter them. I don't encounter them nearly as much anymore.
Well, and like I said before, I understand atheists because in their hearts they just don't believe. I mean, it's something that is, that's, and I've talked to many atheists, on a personal level, and they said, I just don't believe, and so I accept that. I'm not gonna say, oh, I am not gonna say, you're going to hell. I'm not going to say that because I don't want that. I don't want anybody to be, condemned. I don't want that for anybody. I don't wish it on anybody that ever existed. It is, it is a very profound thing. And the more I've come to understand it, the more I realize. And that's, and there's so much emphasis on, the afterlife. And yes, it's an important thing. I want to be cured of the sinful nature that I have. I'm not asking for much. Just give me the smallest corner of heaven if that's all I deserve. Surprise
Well
me.
said.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again for joining us tonight, and we'll have to do another one of these one-offs again before long.
Happy to do it anytime.
Thank you all much. Bye-bye.
All right,
Bye.
take care.
Bye.
All right. Okay.